This is extremely simple. There's nothing complicated here. There's no need to wait for a year. There's no need to get a load of reports. This is extremely simple. We need to end the situation whereby young people are discriminated against on the basis of their age. We need to end the situation where they are super exploited legally, the government saying it's okay. We need to end the situation where under 18s can be paid as little as $7.91 an hour, 18-year-olds being paid $9.04 an hour, 19-year-olds being paid $10.17 an hour. It goes against the basic principle of equal pay for equal work. And yet it's a situation that thousands of greedy employers will take advantage of, this summer in particular, taking on young workers, exploiting them, using them to cut hours for older workers who would otherwise have to be paid at least the minimum or maybe more. That's why the entire trade union movement supports the goal of this bill, mandate, unite, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. Everyone agrees that sub-minimum pay rates should be abolished. And I have to say, I would like to see some of the people in here speaking about how great it is to have people working on €8 an hour. I'd like to see them working for €8 an hour. They love to speak about work and how they know how to get out of bed in the morning and everything else. They're landlords, they're business owners, and they have never worked probably for €8 an hour in their life. I'd like to see them working for €8 an hour now if they think it's okay for under 18-year-olds to be working for less than €8 an hour. I want to go through some of the pretty threadbare arguments that were advanced by the government and then by the rural independent group deputies, the most enthusiastic supporters of paying young people poverty wages. There's about 4 arguments advanced as far as I could see. The first is that abolishing youth rates could potentially act as an incentive for young people to leave education and take up employment, which could have a negative impact on their long-term prospects. I think that is ridiculous. I haven't seen any evidence adduced to back that up. The idea that the princely sum of $11.30 an hour, which is not enough to survive on, is nowhere close to a living wage, that is enticing people to leave school is absolutely ridiculous. The truth is that actually the continuation of these sub-minimum rates of pay, which 1 in 4 young workers under 20 are being paid at the moment, actually is driving young people out of education. It's forcing students to drop out of college because they can't make enough money to pay for their bills. They can't make enough money to pay for their rent. Others are not able to start in college because they know that they can't afford it because of the poverty wages that they are being presented with. That's the reason that the entire third-level students' union movement, USI, UCD students and so on, support the bill, and why the secondary school students' union also support this bill. So that argument it's really an absolute nonsense. Second reason is that the minimum wage rate would then no longer offer any recognition of the difference between a young and experienced worker and a more experienced colleague. So the idea that this is about experience, that's completely bogus. This is not about experience. This is about age. 18% of young people leave school at the age of 16 and go into the workplace. And so by the time they hit 19, they've had 3 years of experience in the workplace, but they're not entitled to the minimum wage. Alternatively, you can walk in the door at 20, 21, 22, 23 with no experience, and you're legally entitled to the inadequate minimum wage. This is not about experience. It's explicitly about age. Also then linked to that is the idea that, Jesus, sure, it'd be terrible. You might have someone in there with years of experience and they'll be paid the same as someone else who just comes in the door. This doesn't bar people from being paid more on the basis of experience. Of course, workers, as they gain experience, should increase, should go up a salary scale. Absolutely. That makes sense. So people should get more, as opposed to saying, no, we need to pay people even less than the minimum wage, supposedly on the basis of their experience, in reality on the basis of their age. Another reason advanced is the idea that well, young workers under the age of 18 aren't allowed to work nights and so on, and therefore on that basis they're being paid less. I mean, again, It doesn't hold any water because this also applies to 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds who don't get those protections. But in any case, this is about an hourly wage for the rate. Of course, it doesn't stop workers being paid more. They should be paid more for working unsociable hours. Another point made is the potential impact on youth employment rates. Again, complete nonsense. Complete nonsense in the context of the government blaring out that we've got full employment. The idea that this is going to result in people not being employed or whatever. It won't. It will result in pressure on employers not to discriminate against older workers or not give them hours in the summertime, and it will force employers to pay young people at least the inadequate minimum wage that we currently have. I mean, what underlies a lot of the arguments about it, and it's kind of unspoken, but is the idea that this money is really pocket money and that they don't have the same bills as the rest of us. And again, it's just not true. You look at school leavers who are going into work, who are relying on this money to survive. They cannot say to their landlord, here's 80% of the rent. They cannot say to the supermarket, here's 90% of the price of my shopping. They absolutely rely on it to survive. The same is the case for many college students who are depending on this money to pay their way through college. So that paternalistic approach of justifying the exploitation of young people on the basis of somehow they don't need it, it's complete nonsense. It's not us, it's not just the trade union movement that says that, it's not just the students' union movement that says that, it's the Council of Europe who have repeatedly found sub-minimum rates of pay to be a breach of young workers' human rights. Will you even listen to your own human rights watchdog, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, which has also condemned sub-minimum pay rates? Unfortunately, it seems that the government is deaf to all of those organisations, and the ones that you really have ears for are the Restaurants Association, the vintners, Retail Excellence, the bosses who are exploiting young workers and are lining their pockets with their labour. And I thought it was very interesting. We had a broad range of support for this bill across the opposition benches today. The government not even launching a very full-throated defence of this super-exploitation of young people, instead saying, well, we'll kick it down the road, etc., etc. But the one group in the Dáil today that came in defence of paying young people as little as €8 an hour was the Rural Independent Group. And I think that's very interesting, because they often like to come in here and pose as being the champions of the people. The truth is that the champions of the businesses, the champions of the likes of Pat McDonough, who was spoken about so highly there, the whole business model is based on the exploitation of young workers, and they're the champions of the landlords. Incredible situation where Deputy McGrath called for a reintroduction of child labour in this state. He said that 12-year-olds should be out working. They don't stand for ordinary people at all. They're the only group in this whole Dáil who are openly and clearly saying we want 17-year-olds to continue to be paid less than €8 an hour. We want a continuation of 90% for 19-year-olds, 80% for 18-year-olds. They stand for the super-exploitation of young workers and workers generally. They're not on the sides of ordinary people at all. Before I finish, I want to make an appeal. We haven't heard from anyone in the Green Party. I'd like to make an appeal to the Green Party to use its power as a party in government to ensure that this bill is not kicked down the road. The government's message to young workers is wait. Young workers can't wait. They're facing into a summer of super exploitation. But the Green Party is in power. The Green Party in England and Wales has recently called for a minimum wage of £15 an hour for all workers without exemptions. I can't understand how the Green Party in this country can possibly vote for a minimum wage for young workers that is less than half of that. Are poverty wages for young people the price of power? Let's hope not. It's not too late to withdraw this amendment or to vote against this amendment, to say no to kicking the can down the road, to say that young workers can't wait and that will end this horrendous, discriminatory, exploitative situation of young people being legally paid even less than the minimum wage.